I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Deanne Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
and what do we do about it?
Hello, my friend. How are you?
Welcome. Good
Welcome.
to be in space with you again.
Yeah,
I'm well. I'm doing well.
yeah, I can see your incense wafting in front of your camera. You've got some nice
It's
incense.
always good to do this
Good. Bring the
as we're
vibes.
having a conversation.
I'm breathing it in. I'm breathing it in. So.
hmm
But I wanted to just jump right in because, our last two episodes, we did a part one and part two talking about American exceptionalism. And I'm using air quotes for those who are listening to us. And, our last conversation, we talked about the concept of what would be considered an exceptional nation. What kinds of things would we like to see in the U.S. territory nation to have it maybe live up to the concept of an American exceptionalism, because we've talked a lot about how that's a title and a moniker and a title of being that America, people that live on US territory, like to ascribe to us, but we know for sure that that's not, it's a misnomer at best, at the very
100%.
least. And so I got to thinking about, I've been thinking more about, since our last conversation, about what would make it an exceptional nation. And I've been thinking about it in terms of, I wanted to introduce an event that folks can join. And I think you've already signed up to join the next one. It happens once a month on the first Tuesday of every month at noon Eastern Time. And it's called Ask Me Anything with Dr. Muhammad Abdu.
Mm.
And it's been really informative. It's hosted by Syra Rao, who is co-founder of Here for the Kids, and she really just opens up the Zoom to ask Dr. Abdu to just speak on whatever is on his heart. He has an enormous amount of information in his head. He speaks a lot about what's happening in Palestine and
Mhm.
the historical lead up to where we are today. But it really got me thinking that when he talks about, even though he's talking through the lens of Israel and Palestine, it really has a lot to do with what makes an exceptional nation and how can we
Mm.
be exceptional when we are bred out of colonization. And I'm grossly minimizing the things that he talks about, but I would encourage everybody. I'm going to drop, just to do a little business, I'm going to drop the link for registration, and it'll be in the description notes for this episode. So I encourage everybody. It's open to everyone. It's an hour-long Zoom, and I encourage everyone to join for the next one, which is the first Tuesday of May. So we're coming up on May. But anyway, I just thought we would talk a little bit
I'd
about.
be really interested in that. And do you want to share a little bit about Dr. Abdu's background and like some of
Yeah.
the work that he's done? I think that would be like really inviting to people to hear.
Yeah, so he is an incredible human. Just first off, that's my own personal feedback and thoughts. I've been, I think I was telling you, I've been on two or three of these Ask Me Anything Zooms, and I got to tell you, it's a lot. It's amazing what he knows and how he can weave things together. So I'm going to encourage you that when you come on the first one, not you, anyone that's listening, if you come on, just stay with it, because it's been two or three, not episodes, two or three Zooms so far, and I'm just now starting to really click into the things because he's so incredibly intelligent and weaves things so well that it's just astounding to me that a human has that much information in their brain. But
I appreciate our scholars that help
yes, oh,
us to like have some clarity.
Yes, and I know I'm not doing it justice, but let me just read his bio because it's something else. It's on the registration page for the Zoom. Dr. Muhammad Abdu is a North African Egyptian scholar and organizer. He's a professor and he's a seasoned expert and analyst in Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African politics. He's the author of Islam and Anarchism, which was published in 2022. His geopolitical analysis is rooted in both his expansive research on race, religion, and social movements transnationally, as well as his on the ground experiences, including organizing with the post Seattle 1999 anti globalization movements, the indigenous Zapatista movement, the land back struggles with the Tyndinga Mohawks. I know I probably butchered that. I'm sorry about that. And the sister territories during the standoff over the Culbertson Tract, as well as the anti-war protests of Iraq and Afghanistan and Tahrir Square during the Arab Spring.
Mm.
That is just a a microcosm of his bio, and he is an incredible human. He's a professor, was a professor at Columbia and Cornell, and I don't believe he's at Columbia University anymore. I believe they asked him to leave in the wake of his speaking out about Palestine, and that was part of
Yeah,
the reason why he was invited to do the Zoom. Sarah wanted to get his voice out there since Columbia has now done its part to silence what he has
and
to.
I want to say, as an alumni,
Yeah,
I'm not in support of any of the universities who are, but especially as an alumni and having had the experience of being at Columbia University and the benefit of like all of the wealth of resource that comes through, and when I was there on campus, like the opportunity to really explore so much and to see like the limitations on education that's happening in the United States territory right now is really hurtful, and especially hurtful to be coming out of one of the most prestigious universities, in the world. Like to see that kind of limited a desire for knowledge, and to like silence people is really disheartening. So I'm
yeah,
just going to make a statement right now as an alumni, not accepting that Columbia is taking these type of actions.
yeah, yeah. We're seeing that a lot in the universities that are kowtowing and
However,
succumbing to the pressure that Trump and the administration are putting on them to silence their professors and their students
mhm.
on anything to do with anti-Israel and pro-Palestine views, which is completely against the First Amendment. Excuse me, if we're going to be an exceptional nation, I think maybe one of the things we start with is actually following our amendments and our
And our
Constitution.
constitutional,
Put a
yeah,
tax on it.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And again, this just brings it back to what I'm going to continue to repeat the political projects that we are watching happen across the globe and that what we're seeing being transcribed on US territory at this point in time.
yeah.
So it's really pretty intense. So yeah, no, I mean, and it's an important conversation to be having as we're looking at how people are thinking about what's happening across the globe right now. And as we think about those things, what are some of the tools that we can use to get to the type of world that we want to live in? And that sort of brings in this like thought process about tools like transformative and restorative justice, and how people understand those tools to be able to help us to achieve some of those goals. And so I know
Yeah,
that there was a conversation about that. And what did you receive from that?
yeah. So Dr. Abdul offered maybe last month at the Ask Me Anything, he talked about the difference between transformative justice and restorative justice. And it rang a lot of bells for me. Just a little bit of storytelling back channel here. When I was living in Charleston and was just in the rooms with some folks that were trying to do some racially restorative stuff in that city. One of our wisest voices, Reverend Nelson Rivers, was really struck a chord with me when he talked about, because we talked about using reconciliation as the word, talking about between the races, between the black people and white people in Charleston, and largely because of Charleston's history and because of it being really the the bedrock and the cradle of the transatlantic slave trade. Over 40% of enslaved humans came through the port of Charleston. We really were focused a lot on the white and black, the binary of the races, completely
Hmm.
understanding that there's more to it than just that. But in Charleston, that's what we talked a lot about. And a lot of white people would often talk about reconciliation. And he stopped me dead in my tracks one day when he said, "How can you reconcile something that's never been reconciled?" And it,
Hmm.
light bulb, I had never thought about that the black and white people in Charleston specifically, but in the US territory more broadly, had never reconciled. There had never been a relationship between those two. We understand that race is a social construct, but if we're going to identify people under those racial headers, there had never been conciliation between those two. And so, why are we talking about reconciliation? So, when Dr. Abdu brought that forward, that transformative justice was really the thing to be working towards, not restorative justice, it made me think of you, because I know that the work that you do in the Florida Restorative Justice Association, I just was curious what your thoughts might be on those two different concepts, and how that might land on you.
So the thing that, well, I appreciate like kind of being able to dissect these different tools and the way that like we think about how they're used to help like get to transformation. All
Hmm.
of these tools and processes are about transforming.
Hmm.
The difference that I myself experience between restorative justice and transformative justice is that restorative justice is a much more interpersonal process
Mm.
to get to making amends after harm.
Hmm.
Whereas transformative justice is that next level in like your circle of existence. So like you have your intrapersonal, interpersonal, then you have your like more extra personal, layers. And so with transformative justice, we're really looking at narrative understanding. We're looking at structures of society and community. We're looking at the roots of how we exist
Hmm.
and transforming that so that there's less harm. The thing
Mm.
that's really interesting is that we're seeing more harm being committed in our current legislation on US territory
Yeah.
that is antithesis to transformative justice, where we name what the harm is, acknowledge that harm has happened, speak about who has participated in that harm, and
Hmm.
then really look at the structures, processes, organizations, and mind thinking about how we exist, and then having conversations with one another to transform that. And then there's always a component in both transformative and restorative justice to make amends, because the amend part of it is the commitment to actually transforming the harm. And like in psychology, we know that when there's harm, to actually get into the healing process of the harm, you want to replace it with other experiences and things so that like you're able to move and along in your healing journey. So the amends part, when folks are asking for reparations or land back, some those are some of the outcomes of transformative justice work, because it's like naming that there's harm, seeing how much obstacles, lack of resource, legislative pieces that like limit people from being able to have in an equitable way across the board support for the things that they need to exist and survive within the social contract with whatever nation you live in. That's where we're focusing the making sure that we are achieving some type of equity within the process of transformational justice. And
Hmm.
then going to restorative justice, the harm is named, you're able to bring the parties together. It's a much more interpersonal conversation. Even if it's a community restorative justice process, it is more interpersonal, where you're bringing people into a circle to have a conversation, to identify the the issues that have occurred, how they've been thought about, how they can be redirected, and then amends be made in
Hmm.
regards to that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that is really what the difference is.
I get so curious about how. So when I was listening to Dr. Abdu talk about, when he was talking about within the context of what's happening in Palestine, and it reminded me of what Dr. Reverend Nelson Rivers said about, how can you reconcile something that's never been reconciled? I wonder if, because I know you do this work and you're speaking on these issues a lot more than I am, and I'm curious if do folks have a hard time understanding how to make amends in something as globally massive as a genocide or colonization and taking of other people's land? I mean, it's like I don't know. It almost feels like you can't. I don't know how you would fix that, or what would the amends be? I mean, that's where the land back comes in terms of giving back, that which you've taken, which to folks, that are listening to this on U.S. territory and the United States, we're talking about. We are actually on a land mass that was called Turtle Island by the indigenous folks that we took it from, and so if we were going to give land back, that would mean the United States would need to, give land back to the people that they took it from. And I know that scares a lot of folks, to think about, well, what does that mean for, what does that mean for the United States if we're going to give the land back? Where are we going to live, And so I'm curious about what your thoughts are. If I know that's a really big topic, but I'm thinking if we're going to be an exceptional nation, if the United States is working towards being an exceptional nation, not that I think we are, but if we were, wouldn't it start with that, right? Like owning what we did to the indigenous folks and then somehow making amends for those actions, and I think that's a stopping point for a lot of people because it just feels so big. But I'll stop talking. I'd love to hear what your thoughts on.
Yeah. So one of the first things that I'm thinking about within either of the processes, restorative justice and or transformative justice, that that is not the burden of the folks that are a part of the process
Mm,
to identify and determine what the amends look like. The folks that are harmed will be able to tell you straight up.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is what amends looks like for me. Well, however crazy, I always give this example in restorative justice, working with folks that have had like significant harm. So you're familiar with this case of a person who their child was killed while imprisoned
Mm,
and they want justice for their child being killed in the prison and then offering the process of restorative justice like all right, would you be open and willing to sitting in a circle with the what do they call it, the correctional officer
mm,
who killed your son and having a conversation asking them how the what actually went on because you've only seen the report, asking them like what was in their mind as they were doing this, asking them whatever questions you want to know about your child and their last moments of breath and all of those things, and then being able to communicate to them what it is that you feel about them telling you what the experience was like. And initially, when you've had that much harm and pain, people are like, hell no, all I want to do is have this person killed, dead the
yeah.
way that they killed my child. Like, that's the first most natural human response. And
Mhm.
then I'm offering well, we know that that's not, we don't live in an eye for an eye society or community in this moment, right? We have in the past. And since that's not realistic that this person would be killed in the same manner as your child, what are the other things that you could think of that could make you feel good? And the person didn't even have the facility to be able to conceptualize that. It was
Right.
just like nothing that they could imagine.
Yeah.
So I was just like, well, imagine if this person had to come to your house every single day and wash your car. And I just made wash your car and give you $10. And every single day, wash your car, give you $10 and tell you that they are sorry for killing your son and whatever else it is that you need to hear from that person on a daily basis until you were tired of hearing it and didn't need it anymore. And what I found fascinating is that it was the first time that the person could access within themselves a consideration of some other way to get to a healing place. Because it was like a moment of pause. It was a moment of, oh, I didn't even think that I could think of ways to take care of myself within this pain that this other person that created this harm could provide for me. And that's the restorative part of it. Even if there isn't in restorative justice, even if there isn't relationship, you're also helping to restore the individual back to themselves, right? Because when pain occurs, when violence occurs, and there's not an opportunity to like address what your needs are, or even loss, death of any type. When you're not able to go through the process of the pain and the grieving and get something back from the person that harmed you, we always think that getting like in you from our U.S. narrative, we always think that getting back is doing the thing back to the person. Like that's our natural human violence. Is like, no,
Yeah.
get them back. You come with me and there's a very strong culture of that in Jamaica. Like, nah, I'm gonna dead you before you dead me. You know what I'm saying? So it's like very strong culture of that. But in the US, we have like our criminal justice system that allows for this kind of like how do we say surrogate methodology of addressing violence and harm by locking humans up. And I mean, they do it all over the world.
Mhm.
But in that process, the people that are harmed actually never get any type of restoration. They're like the person is locked up, but there's no healing process or anything that allows them to like actually restore themselves. And so that's the concept in restorative justice is that you're trying to help people to get to a place of restoring themselves. You're also acknowledging the person that is creating the harm, that they've had harm and trauma that has occurred to them most of the time, unless you're a person that has like, are outside of our normal social neurological processing.
Right.
They, you know, most of humans have had some type of trauma or some type of experience that places them, in this situation where they have to be accountable to their behaviors. And so restorative justice also acknowledges that in a more interpersonal way and has the conversation of that so that the person that was harmed by this person that has also experienced harm, we're trying to break those cycles of violence that occur again in an interpersonal way. And then when we extrapolate that to a transformative justice model, we are recognizing and acknowledging that there is institutional harm, that there are social concepts that create violence and harm on people. If we're talking about gender pronouns, there's like little things like that that are institutionally structured into our narrative, into our education, into our training, into our belief systems. It comes from a place to create separatism and inequality amongst people, which then continues a cycle of violence rather than
Right.
inclusivity and care. And those are then the narratives that we need to like start to go root out and transform so that then there's an opportunity to like be considerate of a larger demographic of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
In that model, the thought process is that you get to be your whole, full, authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And as your whole, full, authentic self, being in that personal peace, when people are in personal peace, it's less likely that they're going to be creating harm on other folks
Mm-hmm.
because they're not in a state of any type of lack, pain, violence, or anything like
Inspiration.
that. And so
Right.
that is the North Star that like folks that are in the practice of this work, transformative and restorative justice. And I'm saying this from my perspective. I mean, it would be a wonderful conversation with other people who are thought leaders in this. But in my perspective, that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create environments that allow a larger demographic of people to exist without violence, harm, and pain.
Yeah. That would
Yeah.
be an amazing society for sure. For
We'll
sure.
get to our exceptionalism, you know, in some way. There's a ton of other tools to be able to use to make that happen, right? So we have like, well, and it's terminology that folks don't like so much anymore, nonviolent communication, like, but it's like, how do we think about talking to each other, recognizing how people are exist in the moment when you're being in communication with them, right? So I like to think about dealing with young people, children, and your adults, and you go into a conversation with a young person, recognizing that there is a definite power dynamic imbalance, right? So, and because of that, you change your language, you
Mm-hmm.
change your tone. Sometimes you change your posture. Sometimes you like kneel down to get
Get
to their
down on that
side.
level. Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes you have an intonation and a vibration that allows for a connection that balances that disproportionate power so that you can actually have a connection with another human being. And the same model is the way I like to think about it when you're talking to adults. So you're not baby talking and all of that, but you are finding shared language, right? Shared understanding of language, different posture, and opportunity to like create an environment where people feel like they can communicate with each other in their most authentic selves. those are some of the tools that we want to like really start in transformative justice to be training folks in
Hmm.
being able to, use in their everyday
Yeah.
lives.
Thank you for that framework. I mean, I'm a teacher by trade, so it's instinctive for me when I'm talking to a child to get down on their level and to, to do all the things but I never thought about it as a balancing of power. I never thought of it that way specifically. I mean, I remember I used to, when I was a preschool director, I used to get on my teachers all the time because I would hear them say, "You don't say no to me." And I would pull them into the office and go, "Well, actually, we need kids to learn how to say no to people. Just because you're
Mm,
the tallest person in the room, you're setting kids up to be vulnerable for, all kinds of fuckery by adults if you
yeah,
teach them that just because you're
they
taller than
have to.
me, you're not allowed to say
Hmm.
no to you. It's important for us to that they understand that there are consequences when you say no, or that there might be
Yeah,
consequences, or there might be different things that will happen as a result of that no, but it's not just blanket, I'm taller than you are, so therefore you can't say no to me. That's
yeah.
and maybe coming from my own personal experience, that's really important for me because one of the things that I was not taught is personal boundaries and
Hmm.
how to know what my personal boundaries were and then to be able to express them, especially to an adult, was just not a skill that I had until long after I became an adult. So yeah, thank you for that framing. That was really interesting.
Thank
Yeah.
you for saying the no thing because now as I'm thinking about parenting, but then I'm also thinking about our larger global U.S. territory's larger global presence
Mm,
and what no looks like on a global scale. I would offer in my parenting that no was not a word that I promoted being used because I don't want a little 2-year-old to tell me no, that's not going to be acceptable. Not never. And what you mean no? That's not happening. But but that's not okay for me, which gives actual more information than the no,
mm,
right? Because that's not okay for me is allowing somebody to say, like, for you to understand, like, the thing that you're doing can also be creating harm. We normally use the no, no, don't do that, don't touch, or whatever. No, but when you are learning and evolving, no doesn't give you enough information about what your what the no is.
yeah.
And if you're thinking about how bullying US policy is with the no, you're not going to do that,
Mhm.
that creates the violence and the aggression that allows for us to continue in these cycles. And so I'm offering in transformative justice would offer, what are the different ways that we can communicate what it is that we mean when we say something like a no and not use the no because the no is the aggression. That's the aggression. That's the power in. That's the I'm not in it, when somebody says no and they're serious about no, there's no more discussion in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And there's a time when there's no discussion in it because harm and violence is happening in the moment, and a no is what is necessitated. But in the negotiation of things,
Mhm.
no shouldn't be the first thing because it doesn't allow for a conversation and it doesn't allow for real rooted understanding. And
Mhm.
and people need to be checking in with their rooted understanding because we've been taught so outside of what human relationships should look like. We've been taught so much individualism. We've been taught so much, I got to get mine, and that
Very
is not
game.
sustainable. We're recognizing that
Yeah.
that's not sustainable. We need to live in collective societies. In a moment, AI is going to take us into a place where we are going to be extremely tribal again. And if we don't have the resources that we need because those that have power over us are cutting and limiting our resources, we are going to have to find other ways of communicating with each other. No's will be necessitated when it's like, no, I need my food. But there's also going to be like, how are we going to exist together when we need to figure out how we're going to share a resource?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It kind of brings me back to our conversations before about binary thinking, and the
Mm,
no for me it feels binary. It's a hard stop, but like you said, if we're not, sometimes no is the answer to stop the harm. But yeah, we just need more language. That's a really great way to say it. And you know, what an incredible society we might live in when we could discuss those kinds of things with each other in that way without just a hard stop.
Hard stop. Having more context helps us to be more clear about what it is that we're trying to achieve.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard?
continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck
Why do
is
I
produced in
give a
collaboration with Johanna and Deanne. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.
Why do